Good morning again, everybody. I am doing my second Gong-fu session video because I'm having my daily tea, and as always, it just would be nice to bring you along for the journey. And more than that, I'm really trying to get better at talking on camera. I think that's something that I have had a hard time with in the past, even in like Zoom classes and stuff like that. So it's something that I think is important to get good at, considering my trajectory in life, and I don't know, a couple other things in that regard. But yeah, today I wanted to talk about the different types of traditional Chinese teas, as well as rehash a point from yesterday and give you guys a little bit more information on the tea setup. So today, we're drinking white tea with chenpi. So you'll see this is white tea that's been condensed into a bit of a log. Kind of like the inside of a cigar is almost what it looks like. And then it's wrapped in chenpi, which is aged orange peel. It's a really, really delicious tea. This one is also naturally very sweet, incredibly fragrant. It kind of has a lot of scent of orange, and it's really good. It's a great tea. This one is from Jesse's Tea House. Highly recommend them if you are trying to get into this stuff. That's actually where this board is, this guy one, this cup too, actually. And the small cat tea pets as well. But yeah, he has a bunch of really good stuff, and he's doing something really interesting where he's importing the teas to warehouses in the US and Europe, and is able to distribute teas. He's basically a source for high quality tea because he spent 10 years living in China, and tea was his hobby, so he met a lot of people and was able to bring that back. I'm sad because in Phoenix, there's a place called Sonia Market, who is owned by Sonia. She is a first-generation immigrant, or not even a first generation, she just immigrated here. And yeah, she runs a tea shop basically through WeChat, where she just is in touch with all of the tea farmers directly, and she's a great kind of primary source. I do order from her a lot as well. But yeah, let's get into the topic of the video for today. We're going to talk about the different types of tea, as well as the point that I need to rehash. So I guess we'll start with the point I need to rehash before I go on to a whole spiel. I wanted to talk about tea bag tea versus loose leaf tea a little bit more. So tea bag tea, like I said, no problem with it. It's totally fine. But the main thing I think that I don't like about tea bag tea is the essence of the tea is given up immediately as a result of the high surface area. So when you break up the tea into tiny little bits like that, like I said, when you brew it, all of the essence just leaves the tea immediately. And so in China, the price for that tea is, I don't know, 1/100th or 1/1000th, like per kilogram compared to loose leaf tea. Because it really is like the dregs. It's the stuff that people don't want. And even like tea that's grown locally in the United States that gets just turned into that, it's called broken tea because it doesn't really brew the same way. So obviously, I mean, that's maybe me being a little bit of a snob or whatever, but I think it is important to kind of try the best versions of the things in your life if you can afford it. And so obviously that's something that's kind of hard to say to do, but try doesn't mean buy in any case. But yeah, it's important to try, the best version of a steak, so to speak. Like where, I got a bonus this year, I'm gonna go, instead of to the grocery store, to the butcher, and I'm going to get a really nice cut of insert meat here, or whatever that may be for you, right? But all right, sorry, I digress. Back to the topic at hand here. Let's talk about the different types of tea in traditional Chinese tea culture. That's going to be white tea, green tea, red tea, oolong tea, and yellow tea. And so each of these teas comes from the same plant, the Camellia sinensis plant. And this plant can be, a knee-high bush or a 30-foot tall, 2,000-year-old tree. It's basically kind of like a cherry tree. If you've seen cherry trees, you understand how they have a pretty wide array or I guess a wide like growth cycle maybe. I'm not sure what the right word there is, but they get tall. You know, it goes from a short bush that produces fruit to a tall tree that still produces fruit. The Camellia sinensis, or tea tree, is very much the same as that. And so to the different types of tea, the processing method is the difference, right? So white tea is the most minimally processed. It is basically harvested in a ratio of, I want to say it's 2 leaves to 1 bud. I could be wrong there. And then dried in the sun, wilted, and that's it. It's a minimally processed tea that oftentimes retains a lot of its sweetness, has notes of honey sometimes. It ages really well. So tea is like wine. It can age. I have some over here from 2010, just a bunch of old tea. But it's worth it to try the old stuff because, like wine, it gets better with age, some of it. We'll get to the next type of tea that doesn't here in a sec, but one more note on white tea before I move on. There are quite a few different types of white tea, often discerned by the ratio of leaves to buds. So I said 2 leaves and 1 bud earlier. That would be for something like a shomei, which is essentially, like, to me, that's like the most basic form of white tea, versus there's something called like silver needle white tea, which is just the buds. And that's another good tea. I actually have some over here somewhere, but that's a good one. I tend to kind of save it for special occasions because it is pretty expensive, that one. But yeah, that's enough on white tea. Let's talk about green tea, the second type of tea now. Green tea is another one that you're probably familiar with. This one has kind of been more pervasive, kind of throughout the world. But yeah, green tea is very interesting because it is essentially stir-fried. So they get the tea, they basically massage it a little bit, and then they turn it over in giant woks. At least traditionally, they'll turn it over by hand in giant woks. And so what that does is it heat fixes the tea. So it keeps the flavor of the tea in, more so like if you were to brew it directly from pulling it off the tree. And then obviously, like, the notes that you're looking for with the green tea are going to be like grassy and like kind of fresh. Like, it's a very very popular tea in the springtime because that's when they kind of get the next batch. And the one thing, so I said that white tea ages well, green tea does not. Green tea loses a lot of its flavor, a lot of its tea energy with age. So that's another thing to consider, is if you're buying green tea, and if you're really a snob like me, the best place to do it is someone that is selling this year's tea. So you'll notice I did 2 steeps there. I'm not tasting the progression as much, sorry, random point in the middle. But yeah, green tea does not age. And in fact, like, it doesn't go bad. You know, like, I've been drinking 2023 green tea and it's fine. It's like, it's okay. I like to grandpa brew it, which is essentially where you put a bit of tea in the bottom of just a tall, thin glass and then pour water over the top of it. And then you can just keep refilling that all day. And that's just a good way to have tea throughout the day. But yeah, I already spoke a bit on red tea, but that's the next type of tea that I want to talk about. Which, like I said, red tea or black tea. You'll hear me call it red tea just because I like calling it red tea better than black tea. But yeah, that's going to be like the Jaiman that I was drinking. That's the base for English breakfast and Earl Grey, as well as, you know, a bunch of other types of tea. But that tea is the most oxidized, I do believe, of any of the traditional 5 types of Chinese tea. Maybe except for oolong, but oolong is kind of its own thing. It can be more or less oxidized depending on the kind of oolong. It's really a processing thing that makes oolong oolong. We'll get to that. But yeah, red tea is essentially wilted and then oxidized. So it's wilted and then rolled, bruised, and oxidized. And that's what gives it that characteristic dark color. Where it really, like, the leaves get very dark is because they're just bruised to heck, man. You know, they get bruised a lot and dried and oxidized. It usually lends to a bit deeper, richer flavor, which I do quite like. Some days that's my tea of choice. Some days it's white tea. You know, it really depends on what I'm feeling that day. Each of these teas, I'm no master at this, by the way. Please don't call me a tea master. I have a lot to learn. But each tea has a very distinct kind of energy characteristic. So it's important to keep that in mind, depending on what kind of day you're having. Like yesterday, I was having a day where I kind of felt like I needed a boost of masculine energy, if that makes sense. Or not necessarily that I felt like uncomfortably effeminate, because usually I'm not uncomfortable with that feeling, but it's more like I had already a bunch of masculine energy and I wanted the tea to complement that day instead of leveling that out, I guess, if that makes sense. It also helped because I had to move a bunch of mulch, so, you know, big strong guy muscles, big strong guy tea. But yeah, every tea has their own energy and they're all different, even among the same types of tea, but that's a totally different topic that we can get into later. Yeah, I think I've said enough about red tea or black tea. It's the same. Let's talk about oolong tea, which is an interesting one. And then we'll talk about what is probably the most rare. I've only had one time, and it's yellow tea. But we'll talk about oolong first, which is essentially processed to varying levels of oxidization, but it is rolled. Like each tea leaf, I could pull some out and show you, but each tea leaf is rolled and then roasted. So that's kind of the two common things. Sometimes it's barely roasted and sometimes it's roasted 5 times. But essentially each individual tea leaf or a couple tea leaves at a time are rolled into balls about the size of like 6mm ball bearings. So, you know, about like that big or smaller sometimes. And when you brew them, you always overestimate how many you need because they expand so much. You'll have like, you know, what would be just like a tiny little bit in the bottom of this little bowl that I used to hold tea expand into the whole gaiwan full. I always overestimate that one. But yeah, oolong tea is a really good tea. It has a very, very wide and deep flavor profile. Like among oolong teas is the most variety of tea. I think there's, you know, tea, like I said, that's been barely roasted, where it's very fresh. It maintains a lot of kind of like green tea flavor. And then on the other side, there's tea that's been roasted and stored above a furnace, you know, where it's just incredibly rich and like buttery and smoky. And you can get that from any type of oolong, depending on how long it was roasted. But yeah, now to the last type of tea. We're almost done. Thank you for sticking with me if you've made it this far. Yellow tea, which is kind of halfway between white tea and red tea. Green tea and red tea, where it is stir-fried, but it is also oxidized a very careful, precise amount. It is the most rare tea and the most expensive tea for many, many reasons, but ultimately it's because there's very, very few people that actually make it in the world. All of the tea makers for yellow tea are in China, and I want to say it's less than 20 total tea makers in the world that make this tea. So it's always very, very rare to find the real stuff. There are people that like will sell it and it is yellow tea, but it's not. Like the people that know how to do it are using a method from like 2,000 years ago or something like that, where it really is its own kind of thing. And yeah, that's besides the point. But yeah, like I said, it's kind of somewhere between a green tea and a red tea, where it is precisely oxidized after having been fried. And that is an interesting tea. I actually have one somewhere over here. And that is of all of the teas, my most delicate tea, and it's the one that I save for special occasions the most. I realistically should finish drinking it because kind of like green tea, it doesn't last super long versus the rest of these, you know, aging is great. But yeah, those are the types of traditional Chinese tea. And yeah, this is Gong-fu, and I guess now I will take you guys through my view of this kind of station and tell you a little bit about everything that's going on over here. So let me grab the camera. Okie dokie. So here's my view of my tea station. So you can see I've got my cat corner where I've got a bunch of cat tea pets. And then I've got a frog over there. We need a few more frogs to complete the frog corner. I've got a bunch of miscellaneous tools that I'll use when other people are around. Like this, you'll unscrew it. It becomes a knife that you can use to break off tea. This is a scoop that you can use for getting tea into your like presentation vessel. This is just a little bowl that I picked up at a flea market. And then, yeah, we've got like a little grabbers for handing people the cups without touching the cups. These are also kind of that same thing. And then a little squeegee for squeegeeing off the tea board. But that's something that I guess you guys have been seeing that I need to talk about, which would be the tea board. This essentially is a tray that has a tube and a filter that drains into this waste bucket down here, which is a really great thing to have. And it essentially is an entire brewing method called wet brewing or wet steeping, where I can just like pour the water around all over the place and not have to worry about it. I've met people that think this is like really weird, but ultimately it's just one of the many styles. I like it because it means I don't have to be super precise. I can just kind of slosh water around on everything and give it to my tea pets and all that. But yeah, so like I said yesterday, that's the Gaiwan, which is a lidded bowl. Here's my nice teacup. I really like this one. I don't know how to pronounce, I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name of the glaze on here, but it's called like Thousand Flowers. It's really pretty. And then you'll see the filter doing a good job catching the errant leaves, as well as the pitcher, which this is actually a pretty cool one. It's got kind of like a rainbow finish to it. It's not super great for like looking at the tea. And you can see it's really like, kind of makes it look a little bit more like muddy than it is. That's a really good way to judge tea, is like how clear it is. That's a better shot where you can kind of see just the clarity of the tea. But yeah, this is my little setup. Here are my notes for the day. But yeah. A tea video specifically about tea. I know, it's crazy, and really I'm not doing a good job of, I guess, finding a niche with these videos. You know, we go from a Catatonia drum cover to a video about Chinese tea. So I don't know, I'm just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, so to speak. But either way, this is a good exercise for me to get better at talking to the camera, which is my end goal in this. Speaking of goals, I did want to just hash out a couple ones and let you guys know I'm going to be working on another exercise for the integrations today, which I'm really excited about. It's the one that's coming out in a little bit. I can't say too much about that, but it is really cool. And yeah, the groove that I'm going to be writing over, chef's kiss. I'm so excited because it gives me a lot of opportunity to be creative, which is the name of the game for these, is to just write something sick that people want to play along to. So I'm really excited for that one. I think it's going to be cool. And other than that, I'm going to end this video, same as yesterday. I'm going to go play drums for an hour and then work on that song and then move mulch. I still have mulch to move, but all in a day's work. I did want to say one thing as well. I may spend more time playing drums today than I did yesterday. I really want to cover Paleo-Genesis by Tesseract. Like the bump, 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 bump. It's been really inspiring for me writing these integrations exercises, because really that whole song does the same thing as I'm trying to do with these exercises, where it takes the same groove and evolves it over about a 3-minute period. I wish I could do more like metric modulation stuff and change the grooves up a little more, but we're not doing that. We want to keep it consistent, keep it to the exercises so that you don't learn the groove and then have to learn another version of the groove. But yeah, either way, I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks for tuning in. Like I said before, if you like this video, give it a like. Give me some positive kind of affirmations in the comments, just so that I know if you guys like these, if I should keep making them. And yeah, hit subscribe. Let's hit 1,000 by the end of the year. Good day.